The Treaty of Rome that created the common market and established the European Economic Community was signed on the 25th of March 1957 by Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands and West Germany. As it took place in Rome, some of its signers like German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer decided to pay a visit to Pope Pius XII, whose system was fully supportive of European integration. But there was one power in Europe that wanted no part of it, and the struggle continues to this day. Brexit the Movie, as its official website declares, is a feature-length documentary film to inspire as many people as possible to vote to leave the EU in the June 23rd referendum in 2016. When King Henry VIII broke England away from Europe in 1534. The English people have always cherished their own independence and their own unique identity, and they have never wanted to be dictated to by outside forces. But as they expanded as a global power, sadly leaving some dark legacies behind them, it has always been a thorn in the side to another power that has overtly and covertly spent half a millennia attempting to integrate England back into the European family.
Sogno un'Europa giovane, capace di essere ancora madre. Una madre che abbia vita perché rispetta la vita e offre speranze di vita. Sogno un'Europa che si prende cura del bambino, che soccorre come un fratello il povero e che arriva in cerca di accoglienza perché non ha più nulla e chiede riparo.
Though it is generally downplayed, the Vatican is one of the main players on earth who pleads to Britain to stay in the EU, and this is not a coincidence. This has been an ongoing struggle that has claimed many lives. The Eurocrats who govern the EU visit the Vatican and have a private meeting with Pope Francis I to strengthen and unify the European continent. To the smaller number who are familiar with prophetic language, the iron and the clay will not mix, but the deadly wound will be healed. These Eurocrats have around their necks a gold medallion, an award given to them for fighting for the European vision. Others look very bored as they sit around waiting for the main speaker to speak to them of the importance of European unity. As the main speaker arrives and walks into the room and greets these Eurocrats, he will also become a member of that gold medallion wearing club where he received the famous Charlemagne Prize on May 6, 2016. What exactly is the Charlemagne Prize? On its official website, as you can read at the bottom, the International Charlemagne Prize of Aachen is the oldest and best known prize awarded for the work done in the service of European unification. The prize is named for Charlemagne, the Franconian king revered by his contemporaries as the father of Europe. But what exactly is driving the Pope and his papal system to push for European integration? What may surprise people is the clue is in this blue flag with 12 golden stars. What exactly does it represent? According to the London Economist, among the roots of British weariness of the European Union, according to the late Hugo Young, was suspicion that it was all a Catholic conspiracy orchestrated from the Vatican. That prejudice, the writer maintained, was held by many prominent Britons, including Margaret Thatcher. The European flag of 12 yellow stars on a blue background also owes something to Catholicism. Arsene Heights, who designed it in 1955, recently told Lords magazine that his inspiration had been the reference in the book of Revelation, the New Testament's final section, to a woman clothed with the sun and a crown of 12 stars on her head. This is verified by the Catholic press. Did you know the EU symbol is from the Bible? There was a woman whose dress was the sun and who had the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head, Revelation chapter 12 and verse 1. The ring of 12 stars is a symbol of Mary. Arsene Hertz, the flag designer, acknowledged in a 2008 interview that he derived the design of a circle of 12 golden stars from the Book of Revelation. In celebration of the adoption of the symbol of the Council of Europe commissioned and installed a magnificent stained glass window in Strasbourg Cathedral which depicts the Blessed Virgin Mother standing beneath an oversized circle of 12 stars on a deep blue field. In addition, the European flag was adopted by the then European Economic Community on December 8, 1955, the feast of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin. On this stained glass window in Strasbourg Cathedral is the pre-Christian mother and child image, and above this idolatrous iconic figure, who the Catholic Church calls Mary, are the 12 stars that are on the European flag. Inside the cathedral is a statue of Mary with the 12 halo of stars. And the first prophecy in the Bible that describes the coming Messiah in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15, who will be of the woman's seed that will bruise the serpent's head, this statue shows Mary bruising the serpent's head, falsely depicting her as taking the role of Christ. This is the symbol of the EU, and with the Pope calling Europe Mother, and the Catholic Church misquoting Bible prophecy in the Book of Revelation, and using it as a guide to steer its own destiny and agenda, with its global support and goal for a global one world government, a Holy Roman Empire. Those who study, preach and share Bible prophecy in its right context to identify the papacy as the last destructive satanic world power will be up against fierce opposition as the Vatican stretches its tentacles in every region of the globe.
Pope Francis honored some of Hollywood's biggest stars this week. On Sunday, the Holy Father recognized actors George Clooney, Richard Gere, and Salma Hayek for their contributions to a global educational initiative. The Schools of Encounter initiative was founded by Pope Francis soon after.
The Vatican is gaining support in every field, and the most prominent figures in entertainment and religion and politics are becoming more sympathetic to the papacy. Religious figures are reconciling with the papacy that includes high clerics in Islam, where they are stretching their hands out in reconciliation to the Holy See. An imam by the name of Sheikh Ahmed El Tayeb visits the Vatican, but for what reason? According to the Times of Israel, it is a sign of improved ties between the Catholic Church and the Muslim world. Sheikh Ahmed Al Tayeb heads the mosque and seat of learning considered the most prestigious institution in the main branch of Islam. The Jesuit magazine Americas says Sheikh Ahmed El Tayeb, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, is the highest religious authority of the Sunni Muslims. According to the think tank Pew Research Center, it mapped the global Muslim population, where there are roughly 1 to 1.8 billion Muslims around the world, and of the total Muslim population, 10 to 13% are Shia Muslims and 87 to 90% are Sunni Muslims. And if the top figure in Islam is reconciling with the Pope, this will make the Islamic world in more sympathy to the papacy, where even the Shia president of Iran, Rouhani, asked the Pope to pray for him, and the barrier between Islam and the papacy is steadily being broken down. The Anglican Church is uniting with the papacy to unify the Church, where there is an Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission. The Methodists are also unifying and strengthening ties with the papacy. And the Lutherans are aligning themselves with the papacy. And this is a cunning plan by the papacy to cleverly undo the Protestant Reformation and align all the churches by 2017, the 500th anniversary of when Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses and separated half of Europe from the papacy. and many prominent figures in Christian circles are laying the groundwork for that historic event.
We need to throw as much resources and energy into the ministry of reconciliation as we do to the ministry of evangelization.
Separati perché I peccati ci hanno separati, I nostri peccati.
Father, we answer his request. And since we know not how to pray for him as we ought, other than to agree with him in his quest and in his heart for the unity of the body of Christ.
They are not the only ones pushing for unity. The young generation, the millennials, are being targeted. A fellow soldier on the battlefield made the narrator aware of a big gathering on July the 16th, 2016, called Together 2016, Fill Them All. It uses clever language and quotations from prominent Christian figures of old who have stressed on Christian unity, and its objective is the largest Jesus gathering in American history. On the surface, it does not look bad at all, but it is when you start looking at the lineup of artists, then you begin to question what type of Jesus gathering is this. Hillsong, who will be performing there, is fully in bed with the world, where it is contractually aligned with Hollywood, and not secretly but openly boasts of their connection with Selena Gomez. Kirk Franklin, who will also be performing there, defends working with Kanye West. And who will be the top speaker from a live televised broadcast? Pope Francis I, where he will join Lecrae and Hillsong to reach this expected 1 million Christians coming together. And the organizer, Nick Hall, the founder of Pulse, is clear that its objective is to unite all of the Christian denominations and to forget about our doctrinal differences.
I think God is already doing the wave. I just think it's happening in different corners, and we've been divided. We got this movement here, and this denomination here, and that group here, and they're all great things, but we don't even know about each other because we don't have the same name on our sign. And so on July 16th, we're going to see all of these waves collide. Catholics and Lutherans and evangelicals and charismatics literally rallying across the nation saying, you know what? We may not say the same things, but we're on the same team. We're lifting up Jesus, and we're going to saturate this nation. Man, that could change the world.
Nick Hall also said that His Holiness, that is the Pope, would choose to speak into this historic day is a testament to the urgency and the need for followers of Jesus to unite in prayer for our nation, that is the United States, and our world. We are humbled and honored by his involvement and are eager to share his message with the crowd that gathers at Together 2016. When you look at the lineup of musicians, authors, pastors and speakers, many of these men and women have a huge following, and to truly warn the world about the papacy and its role in world affairs and what's to come, with these men and women on the same platform with the Pope, the narrator will repeat again, you are going to confront a mountain of opposition. For not only does the Pope want to unite Christians to declare that she is the one and only and true church, she also wants Europe united, where the Vatican works with Goldman Sachs Group Inc., the leading global investment banking, securities and investment management firm, to achieve its objective, as well as the rest of the financial world. But it also wants to unite all religions.
La mayor parte de los habitantes del planeta se declaran creyentes. Esto debería provocar un diálogo entre las religiones. No debemos dejar de orar por él y colaborar con quienes piensan distinto.
Confío en Buda.
Creo en Dios.
Creo en Jesucristo.
Creo en Dios, Alá.
Muchos piensan distinto, sienten distinto, buscan a Dios o encuentran a Dios de diversa manera. En esta multitud, en este abanico, de religiones, hay una sola certeza que tenemos para todos. Todos somos hijos de Dios.
Creo en el amor.
Creo en el amor. Creo en el amor.
Creo en el amor.
Confío en vos para difundir mi petición de este mes. Que el diálogo sincero entre hombres y mujeres de diversas religiones conlleve frutos de paz y justicia. Confío en tu oración.
With the world spiraling out of control, with constant wars and rumors of wars, and turning on the news just looks highly depressing, who do you think the world leaders look to resolve world conflicts? The Pope. This is quite frightening, for it is clear that these world leaders either have no clue about history or are being pressured into accepting papal supremacy. And the Vatican is a system that is very clever at covering its tracks so it is not detected. Let us see how. This is Friar Matthew Festing. He is the Grand Master of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, better known as the Knights of Malta. This is Evgeny Lebedev, a Russian-born British journalist who founded the TV channel London Live. As his website shows, he is the London-based owner of The Independent and the Evening Standard newspapers. He interviewed Matthew Festing in the London Independent and whitewashed history and presented the Knights of Malta in a very positive light, where it said, turning its back on its militaristic past, the order has used this influence to find a new purpose by going back to its hospitaller roots. The 118,500 members, employees and volunteers are now in the charity business, working or supporting aid projects in some 120 countries on an annual operating budget of more than £150 million. The website Foreign Policy also did a write-up on the Knights of Malta and wrote a similar account where it said the order has been a popular target for conspiracy theorists. And despite its name, the Knights haven't had any military functions since leaving Malta. Instead, the order has gone back to its charitable roots by sponsoring medical missions in more than 120 countries. When you look at the Knights of Malta's official website, you'd also say, what a wonderful charitable organization. What are these conspiracy theorists on about? And Al Jazeera News would also have us believe that this is just an old chivalric order where old men and women just dress in black gowns with a Maltese cross. But that is not the case. Adolf Hitler is considered as the most horrific monster of the 20th century, who is responsible for the loss of millions of lives. But who was responsible for him rising to the office of the Führer? In the Times newspaper of London in 1934, it shows the reconciliation and support the Nazis received from the Catholic Church, where this Cardinal Archbishop of Cologne meets Hitler. But the man who helped Hitler rise to power was the Papal Secretary of State, Eugenio Pacelli, on the far left, who later became Pope Pius XII. While the papal diplomat, better known as the Nuncio, this Italian-born Germanophile was negotiating a deal to strengthen the Catholic Church in Germany. The man in the center of this picture, devout Catholic Franz von Papen, also played a role in Hitler's climb to power, where both von Papen and Pacelli signed the Reichskonkordat in 1933, the same year as the Reichstag fire, where Hitler rose to power as the Führer. In Franz von Papen's own memoirs, these are his own words. He verifies this. The papal nuncio to Germany, Monsignor Eugenio Pacelli, who is now Pope Pius XII, I saw him again in Rome at Easter 1933 as papal secretary to Pope Pius XI, when I went to negotiate the terms of the Concordat with Germany. Franz von Papen makes it very clear when he said the Knights of Malta, of which I was a member. His words have been verified by another Roman Catholic, the late Penny Lerner. She was an American investigative journalist who wrote for Newsweek magazine, The Atlantic, and the National Catholic Reporter. Though she was a practicing Catholic, she was not afraid to tell the world how the Vatican operated when she wrote the book People of God, The Struggle for World Catholicism, and she verifies what Franz von Papen said. The Knights of Malta is the most elite of Catholic lay orders. Franz von Papen, a Catholic aristocrat from the Westphalia nobility and Knight Magisterial Grand Cross of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, paved the way for Hitler's assumption of power after von Papen became Chancellor with the support of the Nazis. If we are to understand the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, it is only fair that we let the Catholic Church give their own account. Dennis Sewell, a Jesuit-educated British current affairs journalist who worked for BBC News and Radio 4, wrote a book in the year 2000 titled Catholics, an apologetics about the resurgence of Roman Catholics' influence in British culture, and he details the role of the Knights of Malta. The Knights of Malta are the third oldest order in the Catholic Church. Today, the Order of Malta remains a sovereign state represented at the United Nations and issuing its own passports and postage stamps. The Order's Grand Master is internationally recognized as a head of state and is properly addressed as Your Eminent Highness. In Catholic protocol, he is the Church's highest ranking layman with the rank of a cardinal or a prince of the Holy Roman Empire. The involvement of some European knights with the Phalange, the Vichy regime with Mussolini during the middle part of the 20th century, and with the vigorous pursuit of Western goals in the latter part is undeniable. During the Cold War, the Knights of Malta bestowed medals on the spy masters Reinhard Gehlen and James Jesus Angleton. Henry Philippe Pétain was a French army officer who became Chief of State of France from 1940 to 1944. His Vichy regime was flooded with Knights of Malta. In Francisco Franco's Spain, a state that was helped put into power by the British Foreign Office, was also flooded with members of the Knights of Malta. And when Benito Mussolini signed a concordat with Cardinal Gaspari, the Vatican became the first power to recognize and endorse fascism. And when Benito Mussolini's black shirts walked through Rome, among them were also the Knights of Malta. So a Roman Catholic historian has verified that the entire makeup of fascist states during the Second World War was filled with members of the Knights of Malta. These men are warmongers. Reinhard Gehlen was a Nazi, one of Hitler's chief intelligence officers in charge of espionage and counter-espionage against the Soviet Union. Because of his expertise on the Soviet Union, he was spared the Nuremberg trials and became an asset for US intelligence during the Cold War, where he was awarded by the Knights of Malta for helping the West during the Cold War. James Jesus Angleton was a Roman Catholic and head of the CIA's Counterintelligence Division, famous for his mail opening operations on US citizens. He was also awarded by the Knights of Malta. The late Catholic journalist Penny Lerner goes even deeper and shows how deeply involved the Knights of Malta have penetrated the core of Western intelligence. The relationship of the Vatican, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, and the Office of Strategic Services and the CIA was also important in the crucial 1948 Italian elections. A key figure in the plan was Luigi Gedda, a Turin doctor, Knight of Malta and Catholic imperialist, who wanted to restore Europe to an age before Protestantism and the French Revolution. James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's Vatican connection, strongly recommended CIA funding for Geddes' political machine. Other influential knights and dames included William Casey, director of the CIA from 1981 until his death in 1987. Casey, who began his government career as chief of the OSS Covert Intelligence Branch in Western Europe, symbolized the sovereign military order of Malta's links to the US and European intelligence services. Another example is former CIA Director John McCone, also a knight. Dr. Louis de Gedda in the center was an intimate friend and medical advisor to Pope Pius XII in white on the right. And this Knight of Malta received help from the CIA's financing from James Jesus Angleton. John Alexander McCone was a director of the CIA from 1961 to 1965 during the Cold War. Recent declassified CIA documents have shown that he covered up details of John F. Kennedy's assassination. If anyone had the slightest hint that there was a CIA Vatican connection with JFK's assassination, information like this is an indictment. William Casey, head of the CIA, was one of President Ronald Reagan's closest confidants. He was also a Knight of Malta, but there were other knights in the Reagan administration. Alexander Haig was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of State, and Vernon Walters, the US Ambassador at Large, was also a member of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. This has been verified by the English military intelligence writer Nigel West, who wrote 2 books detailing the Knights. The Third Secret by Nigel West was published in 2000, and The Secret War for the Falklands in 1997. Now, how credible is he as a source? He writes on intelligence for the London Telegraph, and the Sunday Times says his information is so precise that many people believe that he is the unofficial historian of the secret services. Nigel West says, apart from Ronald Reagan, the single person most directly responsible for many of the events leading up to the Soviet collapse was William J. Casey, the DCI appointed in January 1981. He was a devout Roman Catholic. The fact that others around him included William Clark, General Haig, and Vernon Walters were also devout lay Roman Catholics, the latter two having been elected Knights of Malta, gave him a strong sense of purpose and community. The British SIS, the Secret Intelligence Service, better known as MI6, whose building is nicknamed Legoland, has been glamorized by the James Bond series, a rather dark anti-hero. But during the Cold War, like the CIA, it was flooded with members of the Knights of Malta. And Nigel West, who had an inside knowledge how the British intelligence apparatus worked, confirmed this in his book, The Secret War for the Falklands. Certainly, SIS or MI6 has had a marked Roman Catholic influence, with several SIS directors being senior members of the church, a characteristic which can be seen among the disproportionately high number of SIS officers in the Knights of Malta, a club drawn exclusively from the upper social echelons of the Catholic laity. So the Knights of Malta infiltrated both Britain's MI6 and the US's CIA, but it didn't stop at the Cold War. Constellis Group is a leading global provider of operational support and risk management services according to its official website. This private security company provides services to corporate, government, and non-profit clients. It was originally called Blackwater, and its brutal mercenaries had a horrible reputation for going into Iraqi neighborhoods and brutally killing innocent civilians. US investigative journalist Jeremy Scahill did some research on Blackwater and wrote a book on them, and what he shared with the public is powerful. He documented that some Blackwater executives even boast of their membership in the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, a Christian militia formed in the 11th century before the First Crusades with the mission of defending territories that the Crusaders had conquered from the Muslims. It is very clear that the Vatican is protected by Western historians and journalists. And while she comes off as a system of peace, she is a system of war, who cleverly covers her tracks, and those who challenge her are labeled as conspiracy theorists. Former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has counseled many presidents and had a lot of blood on his hands. It was he who gave the endorsement of the brutal Argentinian dirty war and its military junta. In March 2016, President Obama apologized for the US role in that horrific period in Argentina and has promised to declassify documents on Argentina's dirty war to bring closure to victims who were never given answers for their relatives that went missing and were never seen again. This Jesuit said the Vatican will open its archives on the dirty war, for the relatives also want access to Vatican documents, and the Vatican did verify that the relatives can get access to the archives. But unlike the United States, the Vatican offers no apologies and denies its role in Argentina's dirty war. But the evidence shows otherwise. Research has shown that the current Pope, Francis I, was fully colluding with the Argentine junta. The journalist who uncovered this damning report wrote in London's Daily Mail newspaper that Bergoglio collaborated in surrendering the priests to the regime. It began with a note bearing the letterhead of the Society of Jesus, with a stamp and signature of Father Bergoglio, dated to December 4th, 1979. Even if people complain that the media is corporate controlled, you will always get a sincere journalist whose desire for truth is far more rewarding than a Pulitzer Prize winner or Journalist of the Year award. And the Pope is a member of a religious militia who were once renowned around the world as the most dangerous terrorist organization in existence. The Society of Jesus, the Sons of Loyola, better known as the Jesuits. Like the far older Knights of Malta, they cover their tracks and rewrite their own bloody past. US director Martin Scorsese is working on a film on the Jesuits in Japan. It is set in the late 1500s to the early 1600s. Shusaka Endo's novel chronicles the violent persecution of Christians by Shogun General Hideyoshi. This painting shows the Jesuits being killed in Japan. The Vatican said they suffered for their faith, and that is what Martin Scorsese wants to present. But why did the Japanese Emperor Hideyoshi really put them to death? Are we getting the full picture, or is there another side to the story? The late Avram Manhattan was an Italian-born British investigative journalist who specialized in Roman Catholicism throughout the 20th century, and their intricate role in world affairs. In his book on the Vietnam War, he gives a background to the Jesuit Catholic invasion of the Asian continent. Japanese civil rulers began to realize that the Catholic Church was not only a religion but a political power, intimately connected with the imperialistic expansion of Catholic countries like Portugal, Spain, and other Western nations. Hideyoshi, the new master of Japan, had become keenly conscious of the political implications of Catholicism and its allegiance to a distant Western religio-political potentate like the Pope. In 1587, Hideyoshi visited Kyushu and to his astonishment found that the Catholic community had carried out the most appalling religious persecution. Everywhere he saw the ruins of Buddhist temples and broken Buddhist idols. The Catholics, in fact, had forcibly attempted to make the whole island of Kyushu totally Catholic. With the Jesuits working on the film set with top actors and directors in Hollywood, they are going to be portrayed as Catholic martyrs and not terrorists. And that is why you need a thorough knowledge of history when you are dealing with Papal Rome. For this Jesuit Pope Francis I is pushing for European integration and telling Britain to stay in. This isn't the first time the Jesuits pushed for England to stay in the European family. He is continuing a Jesuit custom.
I care for your safety. Threats to your person are real.
Spain intends to place Mary Stuart on our country's throne, and I am to be assassinated.
This armada that sails against us carries the Inquisition.
We cannot be defeated.
The film Elizabeth the Golden Age shows the defeat of the Catholic Spanish Armada in 1588 and the plot against the life of Queen Elizabeth I. There was one system who hated it in line with the secular critics: Papal Rome. Franco Cardini, an Italian historian, criticized it, and an article in the Times of London in 2007 said that a Vatican-backed historian has attacked the film Elizabeth the Golden Age as a distorted anti-papal travesty that risked dividing the West just when it should be rediscovering its common Christian roots in the face of Islam. Its Christian roots meaning Catholicism. Franco Cardini said that the film formed part of a concerted attack on Catholicism by atheists and apocalyptic Christians. This disgruntled Vatican-backed historian reflects the Vatican's distorted view of history, who does not like people to see her dark role in history. So let us view the facts. The narrator has been a member of the National Archives in Kew in West London for many years that houses official state documents. It was from reading a book titled Jesuit Plots by the late Albert Close, where he said, "Never trust a historian that does not cite credible sources, especially state documents." So on the top floor of the National Archives, you have the official state papers of the day dated to 1588 during the time of the Armada. And as you open it, it records who were assisting the Catholic Spanish Armada. It reads, certain Jesuits will come from Rome and Reims to accompany the fleet into England. So the official correspondence of the day, instead of these watered down historians who cite terrible sources, the Jesuits were on the Spanish Armada to forcefully bring Britain back into Europe. That's a historical fact. In volume 22, it also mentions the Jesuits in the Spanish government, but on the top right it mentions the name who this correspondence was sent to: Walsingham. In this picture of Elizabeth's government, on the right is Elizabeth's spymaster, Sir Francis Walsingham, the principal Secretary of State. This lawyer turned minister was a solid Protestant and saw the Pope as the Antichrist of the epistles of John. He had one serious spy network all over Europe, where he had even double agents among the Jesuits. But how vast was his intelligence apparatus? Sir Francis Walsingham is one of the great unknown heroes of English history. His intelligence network and international financial machinations were major factors in the defeat of the Spanish Armada. He had agents based in 12 towns or cities in France, 9 in Germany, 4 in Italy, 3 in the Low Countries, 4 in Spain, and others within the huge Turkish Empire in Algiers, Tripoli, and Constantinople. He outdid the Jesuits in their own bow at their own game and overreached them in their own equivocation, David Lloyd wrote admiringly in his State Worthies. He is called the father of modern intelligence that was created to counteract Jesuit terrorist plots. The Government Communications Headquarters, GCHQ, the British Intelligence and Security Organization, that eavesdrops on all of our digital devices, came from the famous Bletchley Park, a secret mansion located in Milton Keynes in Buckinghamshire in England in the Second World War, where codebreakers deciphered German Enigma and Lorenz cipher machines. This codebreaking can be traced to Seething Lane in East London that was once the home to Sir Francis Walsingham. And it was in this huge white building at the end of the street that Sir Francis Walsingham set up his cipher school for espionage, where he recruited spies from Oxford and Cambridge, where they could decipher correspondence between Mary, Queen of Scots, the Jesuits, and her supporters. This led to the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, the mother of King James I of England, and 125 Jesuit priests, who were not arrested and killed for their faith, as Catholic historians like to lament, but for treason against state and acts of attempted terrorism. The most famous being Edmund Campion, a man beatified in December 1886 and canonized by Pope Paul VI in 1970. Sir Francis Walsingham was fluent in French, Italian, and Latin, and was considered the best linguist of the period. Though little is known today, he established modern-day Western intelligence to protect the English nation against Jesuit terrorism, and it saved the British Empire against the Armada of 1588 and the attempted assassination of a monarch. But this was only one of two attempts in post-Reformation Europe that the Jesuits tried to unify Europe. Peter Canisius was a 16th century Dutch Jesuit Catholic priest and educator, and Peter Faber was a 16th century co-Jesuit born into the Holy Roman Empire and also an educator, who co-founded the famous Jesuit college in Germany at Ingolstadt, one of the top institutions to counter the Protestant Reformation. One of the most famous students of Ingolstadt was Ferdinand II, the King of Bohemia and the King of Hungary of the Holy Roman Empire, who wanted to restore Catholicism within the empire. Maximilian I, Prince-elect of Bavaria of the Holy Roman Empire, was also educated by the Jesuits, who was also an instigator of restoring Catholicism within the Holy Roman Empire and crushing out all traces of Protestantism. Their education in Jesuit warfare led to the bloody 30 Years' War that engulfed Europe in the 17th century, one of the longest wars in European history. The object of the war was to eradicate Lutheranism or the whole of Protestantism throughout the Holy Roman Empire. And historians like the story of the Spanish Armada delete the Jesuits' role in a European war, covering their tracks very well. Two historians who seek truth and not popularity rescue the true account of the origins of the 30 Years' War. In the history of Protestantism, the Scottish historian and prolific writer J.A. Wiley said that we are arrived at one of the most terrible struggles that ever desolated the world, the 30 Years' War. The Catholic League having been formed and Maximilian of Bavaria placed at the head of it, the Jesuits began to intrigue in order to find work for the army which the Duke held in readiness to strike. It needed a spark to rekindle the flame. Maximilian was a fanatical disciple of the Jesuits, and in the League was formed, and the terrible war to which it led, we see the work of the Society of Jesus. Edmond Paris, a widely travelled and well-researched French 20th century historian, wrote a number of books, one of his most famous being titled The Secret History of the Jesuits. He also wrote of their intimate role in the 30 Years' War. In 1617, the Archduke Ferdinand was crowned King of Bohemia by the Emperor. Influenced by his Jesuit confessor, Villers, Ferdinand started at once to combat Protestantism in his new kingdom. This signaled the start of that bloody war of religion which, for the next 30 years, kept Europe in suspense. Because of these two failed attempts of uniting Europe, the 30 Years' War and the Spanish Armada, and many other Jesuit plots and assassination attempts and wars, it was draining Europe, and the governments of Europe, both Catholic and Protestant, had had enough, and each of them was going to act. Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky was a 19th century Russian mystic, author, occultist, spirit medium, and author who co-founded the Theosophical Society. The Jesuits were so vile that even she found them repulsive and documented how they were booted out of different European countries. The Jesuits have done more moral harm in this world than all the fiendish armies of the mythical Satan. The cry of an outraged public morality was raised against this order from its very birth. Barely 15 years had elapsed after the bull approving its constitution was promulgated, when its members began to be driven away from one place to another. Portugal and the Low Countries got rid of them in 1578, France in 1594, Venice in 1606, Naples in 1622, from St. Petersburg they were expelled in 1815, and from all Russia in 1820. Monarchs across Europe were kicking the Jesuits out of their kingdoms. They were sick and tired of intrigue. The men in black were kicked out of France because of the St. Bartholomew's massacre and the Jesuit assassins of 2 monarchs. They had enough. They were kicked out of Catholic Spain, at one time the most zealous of the countries for the Catholic Jesuit cause. In Portugal, the Marquis of Pombal, the Secretary of State of Internal Affairs, couldn't stand the Jesuits, and he counselled the Catholic King, Joseph I, King of Portugal, to expel them from the kingdom. It then came to a point where Pope Clement XIV, under pressure, officially disbanded them as an order in the bull Dominus ac Redemptor on the 21st of July 1773. He was poisoned not long after. But Lorenzo Lecce, the Jesuit general, was stripped of his credentials, and it looked like the Jesuits were destroyed, but that was totally not the case. They were officially reinstated 41 years later in 1814, and this painting portrays them as these meek victims of persecution, and it was Pope Pius VII's papal bull, the queer of all churches, that restored them. But while he tells us they were still causing havoc and mayhem during these 41 years. Despite the bull of Clement, the Jesuits had neither ceased to exist nor ceased to act. Amid the storms that shook the world, they were energetically active in revolutionary conventions and clubs, in war councils and committees. On battlefields they were present, guiding with unseen but powerful touch the course of affairs. While his words have been confirmed by the Jesuits themselves. On their website they said, "We often read that the Society of Jesus was destroyed in 1773 and restored in 1814. In terms of the Jesuits' global legal existence, this is not inaccurate. It is important to remember, however, that the society never entirely disappeared during the suppression era. It survived, indeed thrived, in the Russian Empire in 1801. A papal brief granted official recognition to this outpost of the supposedly expunged society." So the Jesuits themselves verify what Riley wrote about them. And as we close this section on the Jesuits, the narrator needs to settle a point once and for all. There are a few people on social media that are saying that the Vatican is controlled by secret societies, when the secret societies themselves and those in the higher echelons tell a completely different story. John Robeson wrote a book called Proofs of a Conspiracy in 1798. He was a Scottish physicist and professor of philosophy at the University of Edinburgh, and detailed who had infiltrated Freemasonry. Joseph Gabriel Findel was a German Masonic historian who also wrote how dangerous the Jesuits were, and this is what they said. In a Jesuit apologetics book titled The Power and Secret of the Jesuits, published in 1930, René Philip Miller, an Austrian cultural historian and writer, documented the Freemasons' account of Jesuit infiltration into their lodges. In 1902, the Masonic historian J.G. Findel wrote that the Jesuits had succeeded in all parts of the globe in creating strife and confusion among Freemasons by tampering with the rituals and by the introduction of higher degrees. Scottish historian John Robeson confirmed this earlier when he said that the Jesuits interfered considerably, insinuating themselves into the lodges and contributing to increase that religious mysticism that is to be observed in all the ceremonies of the order. At this time, changes were made in some of the Masonic symbols, particularly in the tracing of the lodge, which were evident marks of Jesuitical interference. Following the biblical principle of 2 or 3 witnesses, Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky confirms the testimony of these 2 men and showed that the entire Masonic structure was modeled after the Jesuit structure of the Sons of Loyola. We beg leave to remind the public that every one of the statements which follow in quotation marks are extracted from authenticated manuscripts or folios printed by this distinguished body. Says Mackenzie, the order has secret signs and passwords according to the degrees to which the members belong, and as they wear no particular dress, it is very difficult to recognize them unless they reveal themselves as members of the order. There is also a secret class known only to the general and a few faithful Jesuits, which perhaps more than any other contributed to the dreaded and mysterious power of the order, says Niccolini. We owe a place to the Jesuits in this chapter on secret societies. For more than any other, they are a secret body and have a far closer connection with actual Masonry in France and in Germany at least than people are generally aware of. The ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, the Rite of Avion, the Order of the Temple, Festus Rite, the Grand Council of Emperors of the East and West, Sovereign Prince Masonic, etc., are nearly all the offspring of the Sons of Loyola. The Baron Hunt, Chevalier Ramsay, Chaudy, Zinzendorf, and numerous others who founded the Greys in these rites worked under instructions from the general of the Jesuits. The nests where these high degrees were hatched, and no Masonic rite is free from their baleful influence, more or less, was the Jesuitical College of Clermont at Paris. We will cite one last source. At the Jesuit Counter-Reformation College in Ingolstadt in Germany, one of its most famous pupils was Adam Weishaupt, who created an organization whose name resonates throughout social media. But they have no idea that it was created by the Jesuits. In a book called Occult Theocracy, published in 1933, Edith Starr Miller, whose aristocratic title was Lady Queensborough, documented hundreds of pages on secret societies. She mysteriously died before the book was published. But this is what she said about Adam Weishaupt. The sect of the Illuminati of Bavaria was founded on May 1, 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, a professor of the University of Ingolstadt, educated by Jesuits. From the Jesuit College at Ingolstadt is said to have issued the sect known as the Illuminati of Bavaria, founded by Adam Weishaupt under the guidance of Nikolai. The well-known authority on theocratic organizations, Heckathorn, writes the following concerning the Jesuits. There is considerable analogy between Masonic and Jesuit degrees, and the Jesuits also tread down the shoe and bear the knee, because Ignatius Loyola thus presented himself at Rome and asked for the confirmation of the order. So the Jesuits, a derogative name given to them by the Protestants, the Sons of Loyola, infiltrated Freemasonry and were able to leave traces of Catholicism all over the entire structure of this secret society. Let us see. On Barking Road in East London, this Catholic church has just above the spire a 5-pointed star, the pentagram, the highest symbol in the occult. In Freemasons' Hall in London in Great Queen Street between Holborn and Covent Garden is the headquarters of the United Grand Lodge of England, and its side door also has the pentagon, just like the Catholic Church. In a Roman Catholic church in Rome, Italy, is the all-seeing eye or the sunrise shining from the triangle. In a hotel in London's Liverpool Street was recently discovered a Masonic worship room hidden from the public for years. A woman showed the narrator around, and the Masonic worship room also has an all-seeing eye within a pyramid with the rays of the sun shining from it. And this is open to the public. You just have to ask. This is a cross with 3 bars. Many websites say it is a satanic symbol, but who wears it on their attire? Albert Pike was a Freemason, soldier, attorney, and writer. Apparently skilled fluently in 16 languages, he is the only US Confederate military officer with an outdoor statue in Washington, D.C. Famous for the book Morals and Dogma, where he said that Lucifer is God. He wears around his neck the cross with 3 bars. But where did it come from? Another 33rd degree Freemason wears a cross with 3 bars on his cap. But this is far older than the Masons, where the late Pope John Paul II sports the cross with the 3 bars. And this pagan insignia can be traced to popery, where one of the first popes, Sylvester I, is also seen in this statue with the same cross that was later adopted into Freemasonry. The double-headed eagle was the insignia of the Catholic-dominated Holy Roman Empire. And throughout Catholic Europe, this symbol represented the dominance of this Catholic system. This double-headed eagle has the Jesuit insignia at the top, IHS, and this is the same insignia of the 32 degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry that was introduced into Freemasonry by the Jesuits. And once again, Albert Pike, a 33rd degree Freemason, wears the double-headed eagle on his chest. The Jesuits were also the first to sport the skull and bones, a very dark occult symbol. This later became or was introduced into Freemasonry by the Jesuits, and it is only when you read Lady Queensborough's Occult Theocracy you realize that these Catholic Jesuit symbols and rituals were first performed by Jesuits before they became Masonry. Luigi de Sanctis, the Italian Catholic convert to Protestantism, who meditated on the spiritual exercises of Ignatius de Loyola, said the skull represents death. You may wonder why the Jesuits would go to such great lengths of infiltrating Freemasonry. There are a number of reasons, but the narrator will give the one people can clearly understand. When a Jew or Muslim, Christian, black, white or Asian is introduced into Freemasonry, as they go through the different degrees and as they observe Roman Catholic imagery, this would make them less resistant to Catholicism and more sympathetic to the Roman Catholic Church. A French journalist wrote this book titled Freemasonry and the Vatican and documented that they have been working together secretly since the 1930s. The narrator is very happy that years spent in a deep search and a study of the Word of God led one to identify the last world power. And Bible prophecy protects you from conspiracy theory and fanciful views, and steers one on the right path as things wind down on the prophetic calendar. Many secular critics have commented how the Bible is held in too high esteem by even at the doors. And as the study comes to a close, the narrator will explain why. If it was not for Bible prophecy, the narrator would most probably be running after aliens at Area 51 and looking for UFOs in the sky. If it was not for Bible prophecy, the narrator would have been drawn into this conspiracy that Jews run the world. There are Christians and non-Christians who believe that, and this is based upon a book with no author titled The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, a criminal forgery written at the start of the 20th century that claims a Judaic Masonic conspiracy wants to control the banks and take over the whole world. It was used by the Nazis and has been proven as a scam, and even those who have never read it still believe that the Jews run the world. The reason why Even at the Doors put the Two Kingdoms series together is because of China. In 2006, many within the narrator's church were teaching that China and not the papacy was the last world power. Their worldview was definitely shaped by the media and not the Bible. And the narrator has spent a couple of years proving that there are two kingdoms and China is not one of them. After 9/11, there were people in the narrator's home church, also controlled by the media in their thinking, who were saying that Islam is the last world power. The narrator has been telling people throughout the 21st century that Islam is not a player, but is only being experimented upon for something much bigger in the not too distant future. Let the narrator give an example. On June 12, 2016, a mass shooting occurred inside Pulse, a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida, in the United States. The narrator was carefully looking at the footage, and for some strange gut-felt feeling, it just didn't look real. There was no blood, no dead bodies, and no footage from a mobile phone or CCTV footage, and something just didn't look right. No one looked scared or grieving. The apparent shooter was an Afghan American who worked for the British security firm G4S, who apparently were unaware of his sympathies to ISIS and did not vet him properly. Very strange. He apparently was very sympathetic and loyal to ISIS. So you would think that at least the suspects would be either G4S or ISIS. But guess who is blamed? LGBT activists blame Christians for Orlando attack, according to the Washington Times. That's very strange. A shift from the Western manufactured group ISIS to Christians. And then RT Russia Today, which calls itself alternative media, but is really mainstream media, targets Christians and shows Muslims in a positive light and Christians as a bunch of crazed fanatics.
The 2015 Pew Research poll found that U.S. Muslims are more likely to support same-sex marriage, 42% support it, than are U.S. evangelicals, 28%. So Christian zealots in the U.S. have agitated both activism and money for the implementation of a series of repressive anti-LGBT laws in Christian Africa. They have also done it in Russia with the gay laws there, so I'm not even going to pretend like that doesn't count. You are actively going out and spreading hate, not only in the United States and elsewhere, and this is what happens.
Yeah. So Christians are unfairly targeted for an alleged Muslim act. Those who have on their spiritual spectacles need to see the wider picture. For an LGBT spokesman, Matthew Vines, who called himself a gay Christian, now the narrator wants to make it pretty clear, you cannot be a gay Christian. You are either gay, which in the Old Testament calls an abomination, and the New Testament says is against nature, or you're a Christian, which embraces the gospel, which is the power of God to change a sinful life. His book, God and the Gay Christian, is endorsed by another Christian, Tony Campola. And in Time magazine, he wants to school Christians on how to respond to the Orlando attacks. He said, I'd like to offer some advice to Christians on how to love their LGBT neighbors as themselves at this horrible time. So he misquotes the scriptures. First, please not take offense at LGBT's anger, even if some of it is directed toward you. Second, please mourn with us. A prominent Christian, Ravi Zacharias, sent his condolences to the Orlando shootings, and unless you look at the wider picture, this is going to make it a lot harder for other Christians, as he will be on the same stage with Pope Francis I at Together 2016, who also offered his condolences and attacked the Second Amendment of the US Bill of Rights after the shooting. And the narrator is going to say this for the third and last time. When you stand up and show the world what this system really is, you will be a target. But guess what? God will have your back when man will let you down and fail you. To summarize this study, the papacy has journalist protection and Hollywood protection to cover her dirty history. The Pope has full backing from Hollywood, where he awards many of its famous stars. And the highest authority in Islam strengthens relations with the papacy. Banks, corporations, and Freemasonry is working with the papacy. and you need a thorough knowledge of history in order to tackle the papacy. This was an emergency study just to give people an insight into what is going on in the world and to prepare them for what is to come in the not too distant future, so that people are not ignorant of what they see every day. And as the narrator always encourages, please research all of the content of this study so that you could make a conscious decision for eternity for yourself. If, with capitals, life is spared, Even at the Doors will continue to update you on current affairs. God bless. Feel free to subscribe to the Even at the Doors YouTube channel, where you'll receive regular videos. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter by clicking on the links below. I would just like to thank all those who have sent donations that have kept this ministry afloat. And if you would like to continue to support this work, also click on the link below. If you would like to see this work spread even further, you have permission to distribute this video for non-commercial or commercial use on the condition that you do not add or take away from the content of this study. Thank you.